get out, but really didn't know how. And so that's where I was when I joined the Institute, and sort of haven't looked back from that. I'm now I'll talk a little bit about my goals from the Institute, and also feel free to jump in with any questions if you want to do, we'll do Q&A at the end, but also I'm happy for you to interrupt me during. So my goals were really as I said, I was looking for professional development opportunities and sort of the next step in my career. I really wanted to learn more about the social impact industry. I had been working in the same place for over a decade, and so I knew I needed a change. But again, not having looked for a job for over a decade, that was also something that was very intimidating to me. So that was sort of one of my goals, was to learn more what was out there. I was also a bit anxious but excited about doing a volunteer experience abroad. And, you know, that was sort of my fear of joining the Institute in the beginning, was I'm going to have to, you know, do this experience, and I wasn't sure what and how and anything about it, experteering. And so then sort of thought about it more as a way for me to, yes, go volunteer, but also test out some of my theories about a new career opportunity that I was looking for. And I'll talk to you a little bit more about the experteering, and I'm happy to answer any questions, but I know that you also have somebody talking to you, I believe, about experteering in particular, but I can also share that experience that I had. So a little bit about sort of the aspects of the Institute, and I think this is the crux of, you know, what I want to share with you, and really my experience about the Institute. And I'm going to sort of break it down into these headings, and here we go. So first, talking about the cohort experience. I mean, the educational content that through Mark and Cole and Anna, and I'm not sure who's there with you now, but I saw Mark and Cole, so for sure, the two of them, just being able to put faces to names. You know, there were 10 of us in our cohort, and they were up there at the beginning. I'll put the photos up again so you can see, but getting to know people, we were all mid-career professionals. So we were all around the same place within our lives, some working in the for-profit world, some the nonprofit world, some in government. And so being able to learn from each other, and finding commonalities in what we wanted to do with our careers and with our lives. So it was really that great experience of just jumping into something and getting to know people that, you know, everyone came in individually. And since then, you know, we've really built some friendships together, I would say. Visiting each other in our cities, and I should say the cohort, we were in San Francisco, that's where we started. So there were about 3 from San Francisco, we had 2 Seattle, I was the only Canadian, and then a few New Yorkers. I think I covered off everybody. So, you know, getting together from sort of just different walks of life, and even the people that were locally together didn't know each other. So that was an incredible experience to come together that way. So that was sort of the in-person kickoff, and what a great way to kick off sort of an experience that was going to be virtual, by getting to know people. So I think that was really sort of the first test of, I sort of jumped into this not knowing what to expect, and sort of walked away after my 3 days, which seems like nothing, but with new friendships and new connections, and new things to explore in my life. So that's a little bit about the cohort experience, the people, but also you've probably talked about accountability groups by now, and you'll be paired later on, before you leave, or right after you're done the weekend. But that accountability group, I sort of didn't understand the power of it until you're actually in it. And what I can say is that we were 3 and we became 4 in my accountability group, and such a powerful experience that we're still meeting today. So we still set up chats and talk to each other, and you know, we have challenges that we work through together. You know, we try and do whatever we can together and just keep each other abreast of what's going on. You know, there were a few times in experteering when challenges came up, and we got together and talked and chatted, and it's one thing that you have the whole cohort, but it's another to just have 3 or 4 people that you can bounce ideas off of and test different things with. And so that was, to me, a really important piece of the experience with your cohort. The Slack community, which you guys, I guess, have started, but again, we'll build off of, just having that community. Yes, you have the accountability group, that's a smaller group, but also having that Slack community to, again, bounce off ideas, share articles, share thoughts, share just happy moments in your life together, because we did that too, just as things are coming up. Cole prompting us weekly to sort of talk about some ups and downs, and so you know, sharing articles and different things. So that was also, you know, part of that getting to know our cohort. Excellent experience. And learning how to be online and do all those sorts of things that Slack can offer. It's a very powerful tool. The weekly office hours, again, you know, having an agenda. Cole had presented us sort of with agendas and keeping us on top of timelines and what was coming up. But also being able to use that, again, as an opportunity for check-ins with the whole cohort. And so we'd get on you know, virtual calls and yes, have the agenda set out, but sometimes the agenda changed just based on what we wanted to talk about and what was going on in the world or in our lives, or, you know, the books that we were reading, the articles we were reading, challenges people were having. So, and again, another opportunity to share, to be part of a community and really build the community. And then, have you guys been presented with the checklist yet? But the checklist and the resources that are presented to you through the Institute and the experience really help sort of guide you along the way. But more than just that, I think with everything, it was being able to be introduced to something and using it when the time was right. So you know, being introduced within the 6 months, but there are things and there's resources that, and I'll talk about them in a second, just being able to use them today, like a mentorship guide, a networking guide. So things that you might not be ready for at the time they're presented, but just keeping them in the back of your mind and in your back pocket to sort of pull out when you need them, you know, is part of that, that sort of experience. And sort of, does anyone have questions? Sorry, there's a lot of sort of me talking. I'm happy to continue. Oh, okay. Okay. So the educational content. So the checklist sort of leads into that. But the books, you know, everyone was also on their own schedule. So I think that's also something to keep in mind, that there's so much presented to you. But, you know, you'll see that you may not be somebody that can read a book a month, or, you know, there might be other things going on. But again, knowing that those are there for you, and they were always relevant to other things we were talking about. So, and always able to go back to them later. But they were also very relevant books, which I always found an excellent resource for sort of the career mapping and what I was doing in my life. You guys have all done the self-assessments and sort of realizing through the cohort that those, you did them at the beginning, but they actually come up, and I know you do a lot of work with them during the kickoff, but also you'll refer back to them a lot. For example, imperative, there's resources. I know that were presented to you there, but when you meet with Erin, who's the career expert that you sort of speak to, there's different ways to put impact statements together and things that will come back up for you. And when you're ready to experteer, the Globe Smart, for example, profile comes up. So knowing that those, again, you know, it's sort of my theme of having everything in your back pocket and being able to refer to it once you sort of know what's there and realize what's there. I just mentioned Erin, so the career resources. So again, I talked about the fact that I came into the cohort because of, you know, wanting to take a leap in my career and not really knowing how. And so that was something that was presented through the Institute with career coach. So Erin, who presents to you at the beginning and the end, and also the networking resources and mentorship resources. And again, using those as you need to, and you know, sort of thinking about them through the experience, and also everything sort of flowing, and everything's introduced in time, in the right time, and you know, when you can, and then you use it sort of whenever you need it. Industry calls. So we had once a month, Quo would set up calls with different industry leaders, and really great tidbits for us about what's going on currently in the industry, in the social impact industry, and names now that I recognize. And it's funny that for Colin Mark, George Eyre is coming, or Eyre, is that right? Is that his last name? I think. So he spoke to us on one of our industry calls. He's here in the city, actually. I just found out, for a conference coming up. So, you know, it's people that are leaders in their field, and that are sort of known around the industry. So that's a really cool experience to have that one-on-one and be able to ask questions and learn a little bit more about what others are doing. So, you know, learning about that. Human-centered design. So for me, this experience, again, I talk about educational content, and the human-centered design approach. Sort of didn't realize the impact that it would have on me, but now, sort of when I took a step back and when I started reflecting on my experience in the Institute, how I would say impactful the learning about human-centered design was. My whole approach to how I was looking at my career and where I've been and where I'd like to go, you know, using that framework, because we did case studies during the Institute. We did two, one at the in-person and then later on with our, in two groups. So being able to then apply it to my own life was really instrumental for me in being able to you know, have that self-exploration, and something I didn't even realize I was looking for and needed in my life, but it was sort of then presented to me, and I've used it since. So, you know, the knowledge and the tools that are presented, again, were really sort of priceless, I would say, for me. And then taking HCD to a new level also, and learning about some online courses that a few of us in the cohort actually did outside of what we were doing through the Institute, but building off of what we were doing on the Institute, in the Institute. And so sort of doing an intro to HCD, but then I've done 3 or 4 other courses through Plus Acumen, because I learned about these resources through the Institute. So there's a lot of pieces in there, but again, in due time, and when you need it, they're there. And that was sort of the value add for me of the Institute, which was this educational content that I got out of it, and what sort of offered to you. In terms of experteering, and I know this is, at least for our cohort, again, was very anxiety provoking for everyone, and the topic of many conversations of what we were going to do, and where, and how, and in what time frame. And it just sort of, it's hard to say. I don't want to say it just happens, but it really just sort of works itself out all in the end. And almost all of us had expertiered at the time we wanted to, and in places we wanted to, and MovingWorlds sets up the platform to help you do that. So just my experience in particular, I had interviewed 2 organizations, and I ended up in Phnom Penh, Cambodia, at a social enterprise that was focused on helping youth connect to post-secondary education abroad, and also different mentorship and fellowship programs to help them build their skills, the youth in Cambodia, and encourage education. So it was an amazing experience to, again, apply human-centered design, which you know, we go throughout the cohort, and also to first of all, live somewhere else. I went for 2.5 weeks, by the way, which I should preface. And you sort of say, well, what can you accomplish in 2.5 weeks? And I think as you can set yourself up to actually accomplish a lot in 2.5 weeks. So whether you have 2.5 weeks or 6 months, or anything in between, as long as you set, there's an experteering guide that you will go through to really help you put that into, put the concepts into fruition so that you can actually accomplish it. So for me, what that meant was setting up calls ahead of time. I had about, every other week leading up to it, about a month and a half before, was able to talk to the founders and the guys I was working with to figure out what the role was going to be for me when I arrived, so that when I arrived, I could really embrace the experience of being there, being able to talk to people on the ground, and being able to get the project done. For me, I was able to do it in the 2.5 weeks I was there. There are some people that will go on the ground for 2.5 weeks and do some work afterwards or do some prep work before. So really it's set up to do it, what works for you, how it works for you. And again, I think I mentioned this at the beginning, that sort of using the experteering for me also when I was looking for what I could do, to think about where I wanted to go in my career, what skills I had, what skills organizations needed, and how I can utilize the skills I had, but also build off of what I have to sort of learn some new skills. And specifically for me, they were looking for somebody to help them build what I was told at the beginning, fundraising proposals, because they wanted to raise some money. They needed, which I learned when I got there was not exactly what they were looking for, but again, being able to adapt to the situation and making it useful for both yourself and the organization. So putting yourself in that situation of figuring out, okay, well, you think you're here for this thing, you've sort of prepared this way, and how do you adapt it? So really, they told me it was more about fundraising. It was really about more so partnerships and how they measure and report their impact. And so sort of able to adapt to that, which also gave me the opportunity to test out some new skills for myself. So that was really about experteering. And then walking away from that experience. And I talked about the resources. So of having a planning guide to really be so planful of what you're doing from, when you get off the plane, how are you getting to where you need to go? Where are you going? Where are you staying? To, what are you going to do? What does a day look like? What's the project you're working on? And when I got back, sort of going back to that checklist and realizing there were some reflection pieces too, that were really useful for me when I was talking about the capstone in a second, but when I was reflecting on my experiences, sort of MovingWorlds had set up this sheet that sort of thinking about where you were before you went, when you were there, and afterwards, to really help reflect on the situation and the experteering experience. And then, of course, how you tie that back, which I think is really important, and sharing your experiences with your cohort and your accountability group. And, through your time there, how can they be helpful to you if you're running into any challenges? So that was, and that was tested a few times, because pretty much everyone, I think we spoke to everybody when they were on the ground at some point, and to share their experiences. So I think, in real time, that's really useful to have that. You're not just being sent out. And so there's that sort of backing that you have. So the next piece of sort of the Institute experience for me being the capstone, which is, you think to sort of the end. You don't want to think to the end of your experience, but you build up to it, again, using your resources to sort of think through where you're at today, and then where you will get to, and that capstone being that reflection piece that you can share with your community about all your experiences, bringing them together. And for me, it was I think it was one of my favorite calls we all had as a cohort, where everyone sort of presented where they were in very different forms. You know, some people a very formal presentation, some people more of, you know, just here's where I'm at today, and you know, more informal, but still getting something. Everybody got something out of the experience and in being in the Institute, and so it was really interesting to hear those different perspectives and be able to share them. The alumni community, which you will hear more about if you haven't already, and I'm still learning about it. It was just introduced at the end of our cohort, but just because the 6 months is up doesn't mean that your experience with MovingWorlds has to be over. And so I'm just sort of also learning what's there, and but there are definitely so many resources still available to you and to me, being an alumni of the program. And so, you know, we will connect in the future, that this isn't our only time connecting. And I think that's a really meaningful experience that MovingWorlds has put together. And it's not just people in the Institute, it's people, from my understanding, in every single program with MovingWorlds. So just quickly where I am today, again, taking the resources, and I'm still doing this self-reflection, and I've taken the time to figure out what I want to do next, what my next career move will be. And I use the resources all the time that I gained through the Institute to put together. I'm currently looking for a job, so using that, and again, back to the alumni community, talking about there's accountability groups in there about people looking for impact jobs. And so that is sort of where I am at. You know, networking, one of the resources we were giving was a networking plan. And so I've put that in place and have a bunch of networking meetings set up. So I'm really testing out the theories that I worked with throughout the Institute, and taking the next step, and looking forward to celebrating a career move shortly. So again, just some of my sort of takeaways and things that I think I've sort of said throughout, but it's worth repeating. Just embrace the experiences. There is a lot that will be thrown out at you, but you know, being as active as you can, and knowing that that's there, and as much as you put into it is what you can take out of it. I talk about that checklist because really it is gold, what you have there, and it's awesome. And then just this phrase for me was really meaningful, just being comfortable, being uncomfortable. I think that was one of my main takeaways, is going after things that I never thought I would. And it was through the, you know, encouragement of the cohort. I think that there were definitely many instances that having that shared experience with a cohort, and then being able to, you know, go after things that I would not have otherwise, I think was a really main takeaway for me. So that is sort of what I have, which in a nutshell, I think were a lot of the experiences that I took away. And just to explain the photos that are here, top right is the cohort. You can see Mark and Cole in there. Anna's back there too. And then I talked a little bit about my experteering was at We Do Share. So that is me there, and with some of the students that work in the organization, and they had a nice goodbye party for me when I left. And top left, I love that quote. It says, everything you've ever wanted is on the other side of fear. So every day, the We Do Share shares, they have over 100,000 followers on Facebook. And again, I talked about it's an online platform, so they share quotes of the day. And that was one that was shared with when I was there. And it really resonated with me, just sort of about my experteering experience, and about, I think, about the Institute in general. So, and where I'm at in my career, and where I want to go. So I wanted to share that with you. Sorry, I didn't hear you.
I'm wondering any big questions that people would have or advice for someone who's gone through the process. Anything that comes up. So Leanne, I'll repeat questions.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, it's a great question. So Michelle had asked any advice on how you did the filtering for your experteering to narrow down really both what you wanted, what was the expression of your skills, and like a good connection to needs.
So before I answer that, the big secret is that Millie actually found my experteering experience and it wasn't on the platform. So that's the first secret I have to tell you. Which means that, you know, making a connection to whoever you're connected with for experteering, it's important. I think, you know, thinking through the steps that I did to answer that is putting together your bio. There's an experteering bio, and again, everything is in the resources of how it's suggested to put together that bio. And I think through that, your skills will, you know, you build one of the sort of fill in the blanks is your skills. So I think in tandem of looking at the platform and seeing what the skills are that are listed there, along with putting your bio together and then referring back to skills that you can add there, and also using the resources of the MovingWorlds team to sort of come up with your ideal sort of experteering experience. I think those three things together would be my advice of what to do. And I think reaching out to things that, you know, you also looking through, yes, filtering, but looking at different experiences that are on the platform. You might also get keywords from those things that are sort of similar to what you want to do, even if it's not in the place you want to go. So that would be sort of my few tips.
Great, thanks, Leanne. Any other questions related to any part? Mentorship, experteering, the resources, online community? Yeah. So, Leanne, Patty had a question about, so related to your job search,
Yep.
Are you or how are you using your experience as a MovingWorlds Institute Fellow, now as an alum? Like, is that coming up in your job search? How are you telling that story, or how are you weaving that into your story?
So it's 100% part of my story, and it's often my lead to my story too, because one of the things, I mean, you know, it talked about Erin's, Erin comes in and she's a career coach and does 2 sessions with you. And the first one being about your career story. So at the beginning, I would say it was embedded in there in that I was participating, but there was so much more value in it at the end now, and being today for me, where I could share exactly what that was, you know, because for me at the beginning, the Institute was sort of on paper what it was, and I didn't really know. But now I can embed it into my story so much more. Using LinkedIn and using the experience to sort of lead the story on LinkedIn. And especially, this was one of Erin's points was, you know, especially in a career shift, sort of using, it's what you sort of lead with. Yes, I've had 12 years of experience in the nonprofit sector, but fundraising, that's not really where I want to go. So it's about transferable skills, but also, you know, what I've done and why I've used, you know, had the Institute, and why I've been there and sort of used that to tell my story. And the experteering, you would think, you know, 2.5 weeks, it's not a lot. There's so much that you can just get out of that from the fact that you're going abroad to do something. And I think that is, you know, something that you can utilize in your story. So I would say definitely the Institute was used in my story later on, as opposed to, it was there 6 months ago, but it was definitely more embedded today. It definitely is more embedded today.
Yeah, Patty had a follow-up around just being curious, knowing where you're coming from. What types of positions are you looking for right now?
So I've played around with a few different options and things, and I still sort of play around with it, but using business as a force for good. There's just something for me in that, you know, tying in my nonprofit experience, but tying it into what's going on in the business world. And I think there's so many examples of, you know, ways that we can use business and social good together. And so trying to pair those two things together for me is what I'm looking for. So whether it's finding companies that are already have that embedded in their in the core of what they do, or finding a way to connect the two.
Leanne, I have a question.
Yeah.
This is something that comes up a lot. You mentioned a lot of resources. You have a checklist that gives you a little bit of a timeline, but also people are super busy. They're on different schedules. Like, how do you personally kind of work to be flexible with knowing there's always this content, but needing to prioritize what's most important to you? Like, what did that process look like for you? And do you have any words of wisdom that would maybe save some suffering for others?
Yeah, I think, you know, I think coming in with the expectation and understanding that everybody is at a different place in their life, and different priorities, and you know, there are examples of people that and there might be that life just happens and we can't control it. So I think having that understanding of, and cutting people a little slack, first of all, and that expectation of 10 people participating in a 6-month program every single day is not necessarily a realistic expectation for everybody. And so as people come and go, sort of embracing those experiences. And, you know, as much as I took in everything I could, there were times too where life had to happen first. And so I think being flexible is important. I think, you know, using your accountability group for that. And I think being present when you can be present, and also don't feel guilty about not being able to participate, because I think that's a really important piece too, that, you know, you do your best and there's only, you can do your best, and that's what it is. So I think really patience and yeah. And also reaching out, sorry, if you haven't heard from someone in a while, and maybe just personally reaching out, you know, through Slack, you can talk to the group and you can talk to individuals too. So that's always something.
Oh, a follow-up on that. What was your relationship with asking for feedback or asking for support on things you're working on, or things, big questions you had? Like, how did you go about that, and what worked?
So I think at the beginning, I didn't, and maybe that's also sort of with my personality, that I'm somebody that likes to do things independently and just get things done on my own terms and not reach out to others. And I think the Institute actually, and Cole, you in particular, really encouraged us to use the cohort. And I sort of forgot every so often that we had the opportunity. And so, you know, using your accountability group and bringing up things, or when Aaron asked you to put together your career story and testing it out with others, you know, reach out to others. And I think that's something that today we're doing. So that even I'm doing with my cohort. Somebody's, you know, we're working on resumes, or working on, you know, people know that I was struggling at the beginning of the cohort to get out of my my job, and I did get out of my job in the way I needed to. And somebody else is struggling with that today. And so she reached out to me and sort of said, like, these are the things I'm thinking. What should I do? And so I think, you know, really knowing that you can lean on the cohort and building the community so that you can, letting people know you're open to it is also, I think, really key. And don't be afraid to, you know, I think everyone sort of joins the Institute with that in mind. So definitely that was something I had to learn, but definitely that this community was open to it. And then when you're part of the alumni community, knowing that that community is there too, which again, I'm learning, but again, it's a learning process.
Great. Thank you. Mark, any? Mark was just reiterating that it's kind of interesting that almost every time an alumni shares with a new MovingWorlds Institute cohort, like the biggest constant is don't feel guilty about always being on top of it, and instead just kind of embrace where you're at and just be realistic about what's your priority without adding shame, adding guilt.
Yeah. Sorry, was that a question or a statement?
No, that was Mark got a statement question.
Oh, okay. I just wanted to make sure. But it's true.
Yeah.
You know, everybody comes into this in a different place in their life. And again, you know, I was looking for a job, whereas other people were really happy in their jobs and they weren't looking for a new job. They were just sort of looking for, you know, and maybe thinking through their next steps for a little bit from now and not today. So, and I think we were all understanding of that, or, you know, having somebody that was really invested at the beginning, but just life happened and we didn't hear from her till the end, but that's okay. And yeah.
Maybe one last thing. What was your experience like? Because I noticed your cohort was similar to this one, and I actually find this to be a really cool constant we're very lucky to have. Is that what was it like being in these conversations with people from totally different sectors and skill sets and backgrounds? Like, how did you feel like you were able to, I don't know, take advantage of that, or what was that like for you?
I think, first of all, to learn, you know, take the opportunity to learn from everybody that you're around, whether it be this weekend or as you go through the experience together. I think when you start thinking about networking, and this is sort of number one that I sometimes forget, is that you could potentially be networking with your closest friend you can learn something from. And so I use that also with the cohort, right? If somebody is in a job that you want to be in, talk to them about it. How did they get there? What are their skills? And that's one thing that, you know, I just sort of thinking back to my cohort, there are times where I've asked, you know, people that work in the corporate world, because we had some people working in the corporate world that I was very curious about what was going on there. So I asked, or someone went through a job transition during our cohort. So I speak to her all the time and sort of ask her, and just, you know, last week or the week before asked her sort of what that was like. And, you know, how did you find your next role? It went from government to nonprofit. So what was that like? And sort of using your own network to test and ask questions and learn from each other.
Any final questions? Anything that comes up for folks before Leanne comes up? Well, Leanne, thank you so much for taking a little time on your Sunday. Really, really appreciate it.
No problem. Good luck to everybody, and thank you for having me. And I'm happy to answer any questions if people have things offline or after think about anything. I'm definitely open to it.
Cool.
Have fun. Enjoy.
Thank you, Leanne.
Okay. Talk to you soon. Thanks.